Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
Autonomous trucks and other autonomous vehicles are coming to a road near you. But before that happens on a large scale, some important questions need to be asked and answered. From the insurance implications of autonomous vehicles to safety problems we are already seeing, Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine joins us to talk about the unseen costs of autonomous technology. A petition from OOIDA on broker transparency may soon result in regulatory action by FMCSA. I'll discuss that and an upcoming proposal to require electronic IDs on commercial motor vehicles with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And finally, Landline staff writer Ryan Witkowski sits down with Tom Crowley and Tammy Hodges of OOIDA's Compliance Department to discuss a free service offered to association members that can help you avoid issues with brokers. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. Protecting your cargo is important any time of year, but especially over the holidays. Independence Day is next week, and Overhaul, a supply chain risk management, says they've seen a spike in thefts during holiday weekends. Danny Ramon is with Supply Chain Intelligence at Overhaul. He says this year's July 4th could be worse for thefts.
Well, because, 4th of July this year is on a Tuesday. And so everybody expects for 4th of July that businesses are going to be closed, receiving facilities are going to be closed, what have you. What's non-standard about this particular holiday weekend is that Monday in between. Some places are going to be closed that Monday. A lot of places are not. We definitely advise all of our shippers to make sure that they're confirming those hours of operation in advance, right? You don't want to show up on Monday expecting that place to be open, expecting your receiving facility to be open, just to find out that driver's going to have to wait another 2 days, probably outside the facility on the side of the road in order to deliver that shipment.
He has a few tips for drivers.
Over the holiday weekends, you want to make sure that you're confirming hours of operation for anywhere that you're going to be delivering to or staging at. You want to make sure you're leaving the load unattended as little as possible whenever you are staging. We recommend, if at all possible, using team drivers, keep that shipment moving for as long as possible. But of course, we all know shipments have to stop at some point, right? When that shipment does stop, you want to make sure you're vigilant, make sure you're not leaving that shipment unattended. Definitely don't leave it running if you're not going to be there. I know a lot of drivers think that, no one knows how to drive these things. And that's true. Your average civilian absolutely has no idea how to get into a big rig and drive it away. But the guys who steal this cargo for a living, they absolutely can, and they will. So make sure you're doing that. And if you do have to leave it unattended for a little while to go into that truck stop, make sure it's in a well-lit area, well-trafficked area where it's visible. If at all possible, back that up to a hard surface so there's no access to the trailer doors. And if that's not possible, make sure your trailer doors are invisible or are in view of at least other drivers, if not, CCTV cameras, any potential guard check that there may be on location. Just have that security mindset. It's really about not being the low-hanging fruit.
Ramon says if you are a victim of cargo theft, the first thing you should do is notify dispatch and police as soon as possible. A report just released found that the Treasury Department in the Trump administration erred in granting Yellow Corp a $700 million loan as part of the COVID-19 rescue legislation. The report was authored by U.S. Representative French Hill of Arkansas, who is a member of the Oversight Commission. The report comes out at a time when Yellow is embroiled in a battle with its union drivers over restructuring. The report said Yellow did not qualify for a loan because of its importance to national security, although it was a Defense Department contractor. The report stated that the company was not critical to maintaining national security, given that the shipping services it provides to the military could be provided by other trucking companies. The loan was part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, signed into law on March 27th of 2020. The CARES Act provided $500 billion to provide liquidity to eligible businesses, states, and cities affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. A new way of doing roadside inspections is being looked at. The U.S. DOT Vlopi Center is supporting the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration in developing and implementing the Level 8 inspection program, which would reportedly apply new technologies to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of roadside enforcement while mitigating the current process's climate effects and minimizing supply chain disruptions. According to a release, FMCSA has a limited number of federal and state safety officials available to conduct inspections due to the increasing number of commercial motor vehicles on the road. Only a fraction of them can be inspected. In an effort to prevent delays for time-sensitive goods and repeated acceleration, deceleration, and idling that happens when a commercial vehicle waits in an inspection queue, the Level 8 inspections would be conducted wirelessly while the vehicle is in motion without direct interaction with a roadside inspector. The in-motion inspection results would be entered into the carrier's safety record. Carriers identified by the wireless inspection as a higher risk would be required to stop for a conventional inspection. A truck driver was killed in San Antonio Wednesday morning after he was crushed to death by several slabs of marble. KENS 5 reports that police said a truck driver was unloading marble when a load loosened, falling on top of him and killing him. The trucking company that employs him is based in Houston. The medical examiner said the victim was a 45-year-old man. Officers estimated that the marble weighed at least 1,000 pounds total. One witness called it a horrific scene. The investigation is ongoing, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration said they had launched an investigation into the trucking company Unison Transport, LLC. A California truck driver has been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison after transporting 158 pounds of methamphetamine into Indiana. 30-year-old DeJounte Williams of California was sentenced after he pleaded guilty to possession with intent to distribute more than 500 grams of methamphetamine. According to court documents, on May 7th of 2021, an Indiana State Police trooper stopped Williams after he was clocked driving a semi-truck over the speed limit on I-65. The troopers conducted a search of the truck and found 2 large black duffel bags on the top bunk of the sleeper berth. Inside the bags were individually wrapped plastic packages containing a total of 162 approximately 1-pound packages of methamphetamine. In total, there was approximately 72 kilograms of methamphetamine between the 2 bags. During an interview with Homeland Security Investigations agents, Williams admitted that he was delivering drugs to Kentucky in exchange for $30,000. A new Love's location opened its doors today in Parachute, Colorado. The travel stop, located on East Cardinal Way off Interstate 70 at exit 75, adds 50 truck parking spaces in Garfield County. The location is open 24/7 and offers many amenities, including restaurants, 7 diesel bays, showers, and laundry facilities. And finally, PETA held a memorial recently to honor the chickens who died in a truck crash that happened on Interstate 5 last week. KOIN reports that on Friday, June 23rd, a semi-truck hauling hundreds of chickens rolled over while driving northbound on I-5. According to the Portland Police Bureau, the truck driver was the only person involved in the crash and was left unharmed. Authorities said there were a number of chicken fatalities in the crash, though some did survive. On Tuesday of this week, PETA held a memorial near Buffalo Wild Wings and Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers in downtown Portland to honor the dead chickens and to encourage people to go vegan. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Next, Scott Thompson covers the unseen cost of autonomous vehicles with Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine. I'll discuss upcoming action on broker transparency with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs Jay Grimes, and Landline Magazine staff writer Ryan Witkowski sits down with Tom Crowley and Tammy Hodges of OOIDA's Compliance Department. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Every make, every model, in every corner of the country. Technical smarts and quality parts. That's how we roll. Bring your rig into TA Truck Service.
And we're back. There's no question that we're entering a new era in trucking. Autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks are coming, whether we like it or not, with promises of safer roadways and a more carefree driving experience. But the current facts suggest that scenario may be a ways off. Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine recently took a look at the current self-driving landscape with a focus on safety and joins us now with what he found. Tyson, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
So this is obviously a big issue, an important issue that we're going to be talking about for years to come. I'm curious to start here. What prompted you to take a closer look at it?
Sure. There's been a lot of chatter about autonomous vehicles recently, both at the state and federal level. For example, there's a bill in California that requires a human to be present in an autonomous vehicle testing situation, which is a pretty big deal. That's regardless of the level of autonomy. So even if it's technically a fully self-driving vehicle, you're still going to have a human in there. And at the federal level, there's just the government seeking input on a variety of topics related to autonomous vehicles. So point being is we are at a transition point where we are getting closer to truly self-driving vehicles. However, there's a lot of anxiety among the general public when you bring up driverless vehicles in their area. And so safety has a lot to do with it. We just don't have the data yet.
Yeah, and we don't know. I mean, we think we might know, but we have really no idea what this is going to look like when all of these self-driving vehicles are on the roadways, if we even get to that point. You brought up safety there. And just to be clear, there are no truly self-driving vehicles on the roads right now, right? Just
Correct.
Vehicles with driver assist technology. Tesla comes to mind, and it's probably the biggest example there. But even then, even with this future that is uncertain in our current state, we're seeing a lot of safety issues pop up, and it seems like they're popping up all the time.
Right. Just to clarify, there are 6 levels of autonomous vehicles, levels 0 to 5. Currently, the highest level of autonomy commercially available on the roads is level 2. And that's not very high.
Yeah.
And that includes the Tesla vehicles that you were talking about. When it comes to safety, Tesla vehicles, they have been a prime target for autonomous vehicle critics because, number one, its automated system is called the full self-driving system, which is insanely inaccurate and misleading, to say the least. And number two, and maybe perhaps because of that misleading name, Tesla vehicles have been involved in several, high-profile fatal crashes. I can list some off for you right now. Just in February this year, a Tesla driver was pronounced dead after crashing into a parked fire truck. Last July, 2 people were killed in a Tesla car crash, this time a parked tractor trailer. I know over the past several years, there's been several of those situations where they're not just crashing into something, they're crashing into stationary objects,
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you where we are with self-driving technology. But Tesla was also criticized for a video game feature that was included in the software. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that. They took it away, right?
They took it away,
Okay.
but at first it was essentially a passenger had the option of playing a video game on Tesla's giant screen that they have there. The only problem was that the software didn't know who was, playing the game. So, so technically or theoretically, the driver could be playing a video game while the car is in motion. And it's just little things like that really drives the general public crazy in terms of safety and whether or not this is a good idea yet. But, it's just a small sample of level 2 vehicles causing significant safety issues. And that's level 2, but we want to talk about level 4. And to me, I think we're jumping ahead a little too far right now.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, if you remember, Elon Musk recently talked about AI, artificial intelligence, and that there maybe needed to be a moratorium on, advances and things until they kind of got a better understanding of where that thing could lead. I'm not necessarily saying that should be the case here with, automated vehicles, but you do wonder where this is all headed and what oversight and what regulations are going to look like here as we get further and further down the road. Because if these crashes continue happening, that anxiety that you mentioned there among the general public about autonomous vehicles, while they may sound really cool, there are genuine concerns out there about what it's going to look like when you don't just have one vehicle that's in autonomous mode out on the roads, but you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or dozens. I mean, what's that going to look like? So I don't know what that looks like, but there will clearly have to be oversight and regulation with all this.
For sure. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now at the state level. So at the state level, we're seeing rules being made on what, especially in those where the testing is involved. Texas, California, Arizona, these are states that are heavily testing these autonomous vehicles. So we're seeing some regulation that way. Federal level, not so much yet. There's just so many questions that need to be answered. So we're seeing panel after panel, committee after committee, looking at this situation and saying, what do we need to do? Because there's so many questions that we don't have the answers to. And it's kind of problematic when we want to do something with them on the road.
Yeah, and we're not going to have those answers until we kind of get to that point. And clearly we're not there yet. And we're trying to figure out where we're headed with all of this.
Right.
There are a lot of questions. One thing you point out in your piece on landline.media and in Landline Magazine is that insuring autonomous vehicles is going to be quite tricky. That question being, how are insurance companies approaching self-driving vehicles now, and what that might mean for the future? What does that look like?
That's one of the big questions is the insurance. So I had the opportunity to talk to a representative of CoverWallet to get an idea of how the insurance industry is looking at autonomous vehicles. And the short answer is insurance companies are just not impressed with autonomous vehicles. That's the short answer. Stephen Richler, who is the team lead of trucking and logistics at CoverWallet, he said, if anything, it's a larger risk to deal with autonomous vehicles in light of the loss history. And by loss history, he's talking about all the crashes that I just mentioned, right? So, it's kind of weird because we're at a place where, insurance rates are calculated by compiling and analyzing this tremendous amount of data. It's what the insurance companies are based off of. So, for example, insurance is more expensive for teens and those in their early 20s than someone in their 40s. Why? Because a wealth of data from the federal governments prove that they are the least safest drivers out there on the road, right? A Ford Mustang is going to have a higher insurance than a Honda Civic because years of data show that sports cars get in more crashes than family four-door sedans. Insurance rates also vary from state to state and even locally. Why? Because a wealth of data reveals that City A has more break-ins than City B. So it's just, it's a data-driven industry where they come up with their rates. However, since autonomous vehicles are relatively brand new to the market, insurance companies don't have that same massive amount of data as they do with other car types. So, and the data that we do have so far is not very promising.
Yeah.
So therefore, we can expect higher insurance rates for more highly automated vehicles, at least until they've been on the road for several years and we can compile more accurate data. But the data just suggests right now that it could be a risk.
Well, and that's the other wrinkle to this as well, because we're mostly talking about passenger vehicles, I think, for the most part, when we're talking about insurance and these things. You start talking about a semi that's autonomous and may not have a driver in the cab in the future. Then you're talking about all sorts of other concerns and other issues and other problems that could pop up. Again, these are questions we don't have the answers to right now because we're not quite there yet, but they will have to be answered at some point. You ask a lot of valuable questions in your article, such as what happens during interactions between good old-fashioned vehicles that have a driver in the driver's seat and these autonomous vehicles that don't. We don't have answers to that question either. But can you run through some of the scenarios and items that regulators and insurance companies and manufacturers are going to have to think about as they move forward here with the rise of all these autonomous vehicles?
One thing we can talk about is who is responsible for a crash that involves an autonomous vehicle. Is it the manufacturer? Is it the owner of the vehicle? Richler at CoverWallet, he actually painted a scenario where there will be situations where the safety director of a motor carrier can be blamed because, again, if no one's driving the car or if no one's driving the truck, then who is responsible for, its maintenance? Well, it'll be the safety director. So if the safety director does all of this checks and inspections on the trucks, if that truck gets in a wreck, then they'll look back. It's like, oh, you missed this on this software. It can come back down to that safety director of the motor carrier.
You're putting so much trust in these companies to keep you and others alive in these scenarios. It's just it boggles the mind because we haven't ever seen anything like it before.
We haven't, and then there's also privacy issues. I mean,
sure.
There are many cameras on autonomous vehicles. So who has access to those cameras? Where is that data going? Again, it's completely separate from insurance, but there are just a myriad of situations to where, obviously autonomous trucks or vehicles are completely unlike anything else we've seen on the road. And so therefore, we just don't have the answers to some of the most basic questions we have with your traditional vehicles.
Yeah, and, getting back to that too, it's these questions that need answers. We're not really getting the answers from these autonomous companies, technology companies, because they're kind of working through the process too.
Right.
Meanwhile, we're seeing more and more trucking companies open up routes, especially in Texas. We talked about this recently, that do have a safety driver in the cab, but they're clearly looking forward to kicking that person out and just having completely autonomous routes, and runs. And again, this thing, it feels like we're moving so fast.
It does.
At this point, and I'm not sure where the safeguards are.
Well, it's interesting. So when it comes to the rolling out of level 4 autonomous vehicles, many industry insiders do believe that over the road long-haul trucking will be the first to roll out because all you have to deal with is just the relatively straight highway, right?
Sure.
You don't have to mess with all the all the variables that are in the city. That being said, there's no one really has any answers as far as what you were talking about with no driver in the seat. There's no state that will currently allow that. At least their state regulations assume there's a driver in the seat. So we have to see more regulations get passed so far at the state level. So we might be in a situation where there would just be a patchwork of regulations and laws when it comes to self-driving vehicles. So where you can drive a self-driving vehicle in Texas, but when you get to Oklahoma, you got to stop and find a driver because they won't allow it.
Put out a help wanted ad or something? How does that work?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, these are one of the many questions that we have when it comes to this technology, and it's just kind of hard to swing a bat and hit any of them at once.
Yeah, I suppose if you look at the big picture and try to make sense of it, it doesn't make much sense because there's so many unknowns right now. In the near future, though, what we're going to see, I would imagine, is more of these, test routes, test runs in places like Texas, which is pretty open to all of this, and we keep seeing announcement after announcement of companies that are doing this. But that's the short-term future, I suppose, is that we're going to see more of these things, and as you said earlier, more reports of crashes involving some of these.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot more testing. As you pointed out, Texas being the big state that's doing it, I would imagine we're going to see more states get into the game because they don't want to be left behind. When these vehicles start rolling out. I say in the short term, we're going to see more testing. We're going to see more. I guess you could say more collaboration between manufacturers of trucks and the manufacturers of the technology, because usually they're not the same.
Yeah.
So, that's short term. Long term, it's going to be probably at least another 10 years before we'll see a driverless truck commercially
available. Yeah, that was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Just based on your research and your conversations, you think about 10 years off before we get to kind of the next level, I suppose?
I speculating here, but I say 10 years. And then, of course, there'll be a large price barrier in way. So the large carriers will be our guinea pigs. And so if they're not safe, it'll be these large carriers that are going to get in trouble, not the small carriers.
Yeah. I mean, just the liability questions alone, as you mentioned earlier, are just astronomical. Tyson's a great piece. I encourage everybody to check it out again in the June issue of Landline Magazine. You can also check it out online at landline.media. Tyson, always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
See you then.
And Landline Now is back in just a moment.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
A petition from OOIDA on broker transparency may soon result in regulatory action by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Reddig. I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining me.
Good to be back, Mark.
Glad to have you here. First off, before we get into the meat of this matter, this and other topics we're hoping to discuss today is all part of what's called the Unified Regulatory Agenda. What is that?
Yeah, it's basically a planning document that is released by the administration twice a year. Usually we get one sometime in spring, one time in fall or winter. And it's basically a rundown of all the regulatory actions and rulemakings that every executive agency is working on. And you can kind of get an idea of what's coming down in terms of DOT, FMCSA, perhaps some of the rulemakings they're prioritizing, and gives you a little bit of an idea of a timeline. But in reviewing some of these actions that get posted, a lot of the timelines end up getting pushed back or delayed. So it's not an exact science, but does give you some updated information on all the different regulatory actions from DOT and really across all executive agencies. So you do get a lot of information when these are released.
So getting back to broker transparency, this all started with a petition from OOIDA. What was OOIDA's petition to FMCSA? What did the association ask for?
Right. So this was back in May 2020 when we submitted a petition to require brokers to automatically provide an electronic copy of each transaction record within 48 hours after the contractual service has been completed, and to explicitly prohibit brokers from including any provision that requires a carrier to waive their rights to access those transaction records. And this is really all based in Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations 371.3 subsection C that requires brokers to be transparent about these transactions and provide motor carriers with information. Now, of course, unfortunately, we see brokers go through a lot of loopholes to prevent motor carriers from ever viewing these transactions records. We also don't see FMCSA enforcing a lot of these broker regulations that are already on the book. So this petition was an effort to not only improve the transparency that's required, but also improve enforcement. And FMCSA took public comment periods on our petition. The Broker Association submitted their own petition to eliminate some of the regulations that are on the books. It was quite a back and forth. There were not only the public comment periods, public listening sessions, certainly a lot of debate in Congress as well. And agency took their time in kind of coming up with what direction they were going to go. And then earlier this year, I think back in March, we finally received a letter that FMCSA, they didn't officially grant our petition, but announced they were going to undertake a rulemaking process to consider our petition and to consider improvements to broker regulations. And that's what we're going to have here. And we still don't have the official text of the notice of proposed rulemaking, but within the last regulatory agenda, we heard that FMCSA projects to publish that notice of proposed rulemaking regarding transparency in broker transactions potentially by the end of June. Now, we're coming up on the end of June right now. Still haven't seen anything, but given that it was in the latest regulatory agenda, I expect perhaps as soon as the end of summer, we'll get to see some official text with a little more information on how the agency wants to proceed on broker transparency.
I'm wondering how much we can kind of infer from what the agency has done so far. You mentioned that we don't have text, but do we have an indication by the fact they've put this on the unified regulatory agenda? Does that indicate that we are at least moving in the direction of broker transparency?
Yes, that's how I interpret it. And we're going to wait till we see the details, and certainly nothing is finalized. But, the agency could have come outright and denied our petition. In fact, they denied the Broker Association's petition to eliminate 371.3C. So I think this is a positive step in the right direction. And when this notice of proposed rulemaking is released, we're going to get some additional questions and perhaps some additional areas where FMCSA can improve broker transparency. Certainly, we're optimistic that whatever comes of this proposal could help out on a lot of outstanding broker issues, whether that's broker fraud, double brokering, or broker bond, where some of these companies allow claims to accrue against the $75,000 bond without much retribution, and that ends up where they don't pay out the claims in full. But if you implement some actual and enforceable broker transparency regulations, that would really go a long way to having really ensuring some equity and fairness when it comes to broker and motor carrier transactions.
Okay, let's move on to another topic here. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration plans to publish a proposal to require electronic IDs on commercial motor vehicles. Jay, what details do we have on this proposal at this point? What do we know?
Yeah, again, another one that appeared in the regulatory agenda, and this goes back to a petition filed by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, really the Law Enforcement and Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Association. They filed a petition really going back to 2010, and this is a concept to put basically a tracking or identifying device on all commercial trucks that would help with inspections and identification purposes from a law enforcement perspective. Certainly, we have a lot of concerns when it comes to privacy, but we also have a lot of concerns when we haven't seen any data or research indicating that this would help in terms of improving highway safety and really just be a convenience matter for the law enforcement personnel. I think we saw an advance notice of proposed rulemaking submitted last year. That garnered more than 2,000 comments on it. A lot of those comments were in staunch opposition, including the comments that we submitted back in November of 2022. We called the proposal an unwarranted intrusion on truckers, and this would really be another way for FMCSA and federal government to implement trackers on truckers, which we have so many concerns against when it comes to automated surveillance and kind of this automated tracking concepts. We haven't seen any safety improvements from a similar kind of idea with ELDs. Don't see any safety improvements in this one either. Now, the agency has said they're going to move forward with the rulemaking process, perhaps as early as November, kind of wait and see on that. Given the opposition in the advance notice of proposed rulemaking last year, there's also been opposition in Congress as well on this proposal. So we'll kind of wait and see where this one goes, but certainly an issue we're going to continue to oppose.
You mentioned that this really provides, for the most part, just convenience for law enforcement officers. But I'm wondering what their stated reasoning was behind this. CVSA, in calling for this, what did they say they wanted it for?
Yeah, they think it would help identify unsafe motor carriers and could be a mechanism to really get them out of business. But when you look at putting these remote IDs on motor carriers, again, the privacy and constitutional concerns do really raise a lot of eyebrows. And it just, again, there's no data or research indicating that what the law enforcement folks say is going to have an actual effect. And again, the cost in putting these devices, again, you're going to have more IT and technology infrastructure being implemented if this was ever finalized. And we see all the problems with that, with the LDs and some other issues as well. So really, we don't see any positive aspect to this proposal. Hoping it's not going to go anywhere, and we'll kind of see later this year if FMCSA does indeed decide to move forward with a notice of proposed rulemaking.
You used a term in there that always makes my ears perk up: constitutional concerns. What would those be?
It's really, privacy and protection against unwarranted searches and seizures. And I know we kind of went through these arguments in the ELD legal challenges, and unfortunately, some of the courts did not uphold those. I think this is even a even more broader invasion of privacy, and I imagine there could be some legal considerations if this were ever to be finalized. But we're not there yet, and we're going to continue to oppose this on the regulatory front. And certainly, I think there's enough congressional concern from lawmakers that we've seen where, if needed, there could be some congressional action to prevent the agency from moving forward with any rulemaking.
You've made a couple of references to this, but I'm kind of curious, what sort of information is CVSA looking for here? What kind of information might be shared if this were to go into place?
Yeah, in theory, you would have data on the motor carrier's history, the personal data on the driver's history, prior inspections. You could, there's really no limit to what you could acquire. In theory, you could figure out how fast the vehicle was moving 2 hours ago, and they certainly have concerns about retroactive enforcement there. And it's really mind-boggling to think about what type of information could be acquired. And again, that brings up so many privacy concerns. We don't want to see this get implemented. And, no comment period is open right now, but we did have that one back in last year that did get a lot of opposition to it with well over 2,000 comments. So don't want to see this one get advanced, but it does sound like FMCSA is continuing to consider it.
Another proposal would require new entrants, meaning new motor carriers, to take a proficiency test before getting operating authority. What is required now in that area?
Right. So there's new entrant audits that FMCSA undertakes, but over the last couple of years, we've really seen a boom in these new entrant registrations, new motor carrier registrations. And I think based on this kind of re-proposal from FMCSA, they're kind of bringing back up an advance notice of proposed rulemaking from 2009 when it came to kind of a proficiency exam for new registrants and new entrants into the industry. Back in 2009, OOIDA opposed that idea of proficiency exam, and FMCSA never really advanced that rulemaking. But with this influx of new entries into the industry and new carriers, I think FMCSA wants to kind of revisit this and see if there's more that they can do that perhaps isn't being accomplished by the new entrant audit process that is currently in place. Don't really have a whole lot of information about the ideas that they're considering. But in the regulatory agenda, they said a new proposal could be out as soon as August of this year. So another one to kind of wait and see how FMCSA moves forward and see if they're going to just kind of rehash this idea of a proficiency exam or if they've got something else that they want to consider. So kind of maybe see later this year what they're going to come up with on this issue.
Okay. Well, Jay, we're out of time, but thank you very much for all the information. We certainly appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you, Mark.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And folks, when regulations come up for comment, we provide an easy way for you to make your opinion known. All you have to do is go to the website fightingfortruckers.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
The problem of broker fraud is epidemic in the trucking industry, but there are things you can do to help avoid it. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddig. Welcome back to the program. OOIDA's compliance department deals with the problem in helping truckers every single day, and a lot of the places they recommend truckers go for help are free of charge. Landline magazine staff writer Ryan Witkowski has been looking into the problem, and he's here now with the report.
Thanks, Mark. Well, broker fraud and broker transparency have been a big issue and a big topic, not only around OOIDA, but also throughout the entire trucking industry. Joining me in studio is Tammy Hodges and Tom Crowley, both of the OOIDA Compliance Department. Thanks so much for joining us today, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, good to be here.
So as I mentioned, broker fraud has been something that's been a big topic of conversation among truckers, and one of those things that you can really kind of get in front of and kind of see some of the red flags early is just going through that vetting process. And Tom, we were having a conversation about that, but what are some of the things that drivers can do to really thoroughly vet a broker prior to signing on?
One of the first things they can do as they're, looking at brokers and deciding, who to go with is, do some confirmation. Check the brokers, go to the FMCSA's website, their safer website, and verify that the information that they're seeing on a board where they're finding this broker or that the broker's giving them is the same as the information there. Check phone numbers, check email addresses, check the domain names for the email address. Because if you got a broker that's operating under so-and-so broker at gmail.com, I'm not saying that makes them a fraud, but I would look much closer at them.
And one of the things that we talked about a little bit in that vetting process too is also being able to get on there and do a broker credit check as well. I mean, some of those things that you can find out and some of the things that'll pop up, you're not going to be able to find via that FMCSA site.
Correct. That's right. And for the credit check, I mean, and brokers the same as you or I. Everybody with a phone number, a name and a Social Security number has some type of a credit rating that you can check through, say, the big three, credit check places, right? Experian, TransUnion, all this. Well, carriers are not looking for that type of a credit check on a broker. I'm not saying it's not good to have, but the credit check they're looking for is days to pay. Does this broker pay their freight bills? How long does it take them? Are they on a net 30, a net 60? And can you wait to get paid? That's part of the kind of credit check that you're looking at.
So, Tammy, when you look at that credit check, though, what are some of those red flags that are going to pop up on there that you see that you say, well, maybe this is going to give me a little bit of pause about this broker?
To me, it would be their credit rating. They usually go from A to F. The days of pay. I want to work with a broker that's going to pay me in 30 days, not 90 days, not 120 days, but 30 days.
One thing that kind of struck me out too, and I think, about just personal credit is, sometimes good people can have bad credit. Sometimes bad people, they can have good credit. Is that true with brokers as well? Can you see sometimes where a good broker can have a bad score, maybe some negative information?
Well, I would say yes and no. Yes, as far as the actual credit rating. But when you look at, a broker's days to pay, that really, you don't want to work with anybody that's way out there on days to pay or that 60, 90 days. I mean, because that's somebody that, why would they be that far out? You've got to ask yourself that. And a lot of brokers, they do use a factor type situation to get their money to pay too, which, is not the carrier's issue unless they don't get paid.
Exactly. Well, and guys, we talked a little bit about some of the good and some of the bad, but maybe some of the other red flags to watch out for as you're going through that vetting process outside of the credit check. What are those?
For me, I tell a lot of members to go to the FMCSA's website. You can see how long they've been in business. You can see when they got their surety bond. If that broker has been in business, say 2 years, and they've had 4 different bond companies in that time, that's a red alert.
Yeah, I would agree. And you know that length of business, because most of the fraudsters that we see, when I talk to a carrier and unfortunately they haven't been paid, and you know that it's a dead end. I mean, it's a bad deal. Then they got to really go back to the shipper. It really gets in depth to try to get paid. But most of them, they've only been in business 3 months, 2 or 3 months. And by that time, somebody has filed on their bond is getting ready to cancel. So it does put a cancellation date in there. So if you go to the Fed's website on the Safer side or on the license and insurance side, and you can see then if there's a cancellation date or they haven't, and I hate doing this, saying if you've only been in business 3 months, be careful. But be careful, because if a broker's only been around 3 months, I mean, there could be that could be the biggest sign.
Well, and you guys get to hear a lot of those horror stories and you get to be on the other side of that. But like, how often do you hear those stories and you think, boy, some simple, homework before you did this would have really avoided this whole situation?
Every day.
I was going to say every day. Yeah.
I mean,
and it's unfortunate.
If it's such a common occurrence too, and I kind of already know the answer to this, but like if it's such a common occurrence, then why does it keep happening? Why do these hiccups keep happening? Is it just educating guys and getting them better at knowing that this is what you need to do?
Education is a big part of it. A lot of guys will take a load just to get them back close to home or get them to the next pickup. They don't do any kind of credit checks. If they do have factoring companies, a lot of them don't ask the factoring company what their credit rating is.
Yeah,
They'll just take the load and...
And that's the thing, some of these loads... these scammers, they make them look appealing. They pay a little bit better than what the average rate is, and they don't, they don't hassle you much. You're like, oh man, I finally found a load that's going to make my money right. Oh, this is going to be great, until you don't get paid at all. I mean, and they feed on new carriers, inexperience, and people that just get in a hurry. I mean, they just make it easy for the scammers.
So getting back to doing those credit checks on brokers, this is a service that OOIDA offers its members for free?
Yes, if you go to OOIDA.com and you log in and go under Business Services tab, there is a place there where you can get free broker credit checks. It's offered through RTS Pro. You go through the process there, and as a member, they will want your member ID number, your membership number, and then you can get that free credit check and do a little credit check. But keep in mind, that's just one aspect. You do want to do the full look at them through the Fed's website, through the LNI website. Google them. I mean, see what you come up with,
I mean, it's as simple as just maybe checking out some reviews and kind of asking around as well. Word of mouth can be kind of a powerful tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And last thing I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about, you hit on it a little bit, but some of those pay options with brokers, what are some of the things that drivers should be looking for? What are the better pay options for them to be considering?
Well, I mean, obviously, if a driver or if the carrier, has their cash flow right, then they can wait, the 15 or 20 days or whatever that a broker's going to take to pay them. That's the best way, because then you don't lose a percentage. If cash flow is an issue, and for many small carriers it is, maybe a quick pay option. Maybe the broker has a quick pay option. That's one option. Factoring is another option. I always warn on factoring, though, just be careful, because once a factor gets their hooks in you, they file a UCC on you and your business. It's difficult to get them out. So, know what you're doing. Read those contracts and know what you're getting into.
And most brokers nowadays offer quick pay,
Most
for
do.
3 to 5% of the load pay, and you can get paid within, 2 to 5 days, whatever the agreement is.
And I'm not real big on quick pay, other than the fact that you can use that if you want it. Where factoring, once you get a factor in there, you're stuck in there. So quick pay may be an option there.
Well, guys, as we said earlier, education really important in this, and kind of getting the word out there, telling drivers what they can do. So I certainly appreciate you joining us in studio today to spread that word and get some of that knowledge into the right hands.
Hey, glad you had us here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. And if you have questions about broker fraud or other related issues, you can call Business Services at 816 816-229-5791. Our program is produced by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, the only national organization representing the interest of professional truckers in Washington, D.C., in state legislatures, and with the regulatory agencies dealing with transportation and highway safety. If you're not a member yet, call our main number during business hours to join today. That number is 816-229-5791, and you can join right on the phone. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.